Millionaire invites Black, Maid's son, to play chess as a joke. She didn't know he was a child genius. Millionaire Vivienne Beaumont thought it would be funny to humiliate her maid son in front of her powerful guest. "Sit down, boy. Show us your little tricks on the chessboard," she sneered. The chandeliers glittered, laughter echoed, and champagne glasses clinked. But what none of them knew was that the boy wasn't just playing. He was calculating. And in a matter of move, the balance of power in that mansion would shift forever. The Beaumont mansion glittered like a jewel in the night. Marble pillars rose toward ceilings painted with gilded frescoes, and chandeliers sparkled as though entire constellations had been trapped in their crystal. Guests moved about the hall in designer gowns and tailored suits, their laughter sharp, rehearsed, and dripping with superiority. At the center of it all sat Vivienne Beaumont, heiress, socialite, and self-declared queen of her empire. She was a woman who lived on whispers of scandal and the weight of her fortune, her silver suit shimmering with every movement, her crisp blue blouse a perfect contrast to her diamond necklace. Wherever she went, eyes followed, not out of affection, but out of the sharp fear and fascination she inspired. Vivienne liked to toy with people. It was how she reminded the world of its hierarchy, her throne firmly at the top, everyone else scrambling below. And tonight, she was in the mood for entertainment. It was Rosa who had caught her attention. Rosa, the quiet maid who worked tirelessly in the background, her hands roughened by endless chores, her presence barely acknowledged by the elite guests. She had a son, a boy she kept close whenever she could, since life had not given them many chances to be together. His name was Elijah, and tonight, Rosa had let him wait quietly in the corner of the hall while she worked, hoping no one would notice. But Vivienne noticed everything. Her eyes, sharp, cold, calculating, fell on the boy as he clung nervously to his mother's side. He was 10, maybe 11, his shirt too small, his shoes worn. He didn't fit the golden glow of the mansion, and that was precisely why Vivienne's lips curved into a sly smile. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice cutting to the music like glass. Rosa froze mid-step, a tray of crystal glasses trembling in her hand. "That's my son, ma'am," she said softly. "Elijah." The room stirred. Guests leaned toward one another, their whispers sharp as needles. A maid's son here among them? The audacity, the scandal, the delicious chance to watch something humiliating unfold. Vivienne's smile widened. Her gaze drifted toward the side of the hall, where a magnificent mahogany chessboard gleamed under the chandelier's light. The ivory and obsidian pieces were hand-carved, each one a work of art, meant as much for display as for play. Vivienne tapped her manicured finger against the armrest of her chair. Then, in a voice loud enough for all to hear, she said, "Tell me, boy, do you play chess?" The hall fell silent. Rosa's heart dropped into her stomach. Elijah blinked, caught off guard by the attention. He glanced at his mother, searching her face for guidance, then back at Vivienne. "A little," he whispered. The guests chuckled. Some sipped their wine, smirking. Others leaned closer, already eager for the spectacle they believed was about to unfold. Vivienne's laughter was soft, but laced with venom. "How delightful," she said. "Come then, play with me?" Rosa stepped forward quickly, her voice trembling. "Please, ma'am, he's only a child." But Vivienne silenced her with a raised hand. "All the more reason. It will be amusing." She rose from her seat with a regal air, her silver suit catching the chandelier's fire as she crossed the chessboard. The crowd parted for her, forming a circle around the table like spectators at an arena. Rosa stood frozen, her hands clenched at her apron, as Elijah was ushered forward. The boy's steps echoed on the marble floor. His palms were sweaty, his heart thundering in his chest, but something deep inside urged him to sit. He slid into the chair across from Vivienne, dwarfed by the towering table, the board between them gleaming like a battlefield. Vivienne smirked as she took her seat, brushing her fingers over the ivory pieces. "Don't be afraid," she cooed, though her eyes were cold. "I'll go easy on you." The guests laughed. Rosa's lips trembled, but she said nothing, her prayers locked in her chest. The game began. Vivienne opened with practiced ease, her knight leaping forward. Her movements were fluid, confident, as though every piece bent to her will. Elijah stared at the board, his small fingers hovering uncertainly before nudging a pawn forward. The crowd chuckled. "How adorable," someone whispered. But then came the second move, and the third. Elijah's eyes changed. The nervous darting faded, replaced by sharp focus. His brow furrowed, his breathing slowed, and suddenly each move flowed with deliberate purpose. Vivienne's smirk lingered, but her eyes narrowed slightly. The boy's pawn wasn't random. It was calculated. Her queen advanced. His knight countered. Her rook swung. His bishop cut the line clean. The guests began to murmur, their laughter dimming into something else, curiosity. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "Beginner's luck." Another scoffed, though their tone wavered. Vivienne leaned forward, her hand tightening on her glass piece before setting it down with more force than necessary. She made another move, swift, almost aggressive. Elijah barely blinked before sliding his rook across the board, cutting off her queen's escape. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rose's hands flew to her mouth. Vivienne froze, her perfect smile cracking at the edges. The boy's lips parted ever so slightly. One word escaped him, soft but steady, carrying through the silence of the hall. Check for a heartbeat. Time stopped. The chandelier light flickered against crystal glasses, against polished marble, against faces frozen in disbelief. The boy, Rose's son, the maid's son, had cornered Vivienne Beaumont's queen. The millionaire leaned back slowly, her eyes narrowing, the weight of the room pressing down on her pride. She forced a laugh, sharp and brittle. "Interesting," she said, "but the game isn't over." Her voice was smooth, but inside, something cold stirred. Elijah remained still, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, as though the board itself whispered secrets only he could hear. Vivienne reached forward again, her manicured nails tapping against the bishop before she slid it into position, blocking his path. She sat back, her smirk returning, as if to say, "There, that should silence you." But Elijah only tilted his head. His small fingers brushed over his knight, and with a careful movement, he positioned it in such a way that the crowd gasped again. The trap was tightening. Not luck, not chance, but strategy. The murmurs grew louder. Guests leaned forward, eyes widening. Is he actually good?" someone whispered. Vivienne's smirk faltered again. Her moves grew sharper, more aggressive, her pride stinging with every counter Elijah laid on the board. The boy was quiet, his face calm, but his eyes burned with silent fire. Rose's chest swelled with both terror and awe. She had always known her son was bright. He devoured books, solved puzzles that left grown men stumped, but never had she imagined him here, under the gaze of the wealthy, holding his own against a woman who crushed rivals for sport. Move after move, the board transformed. The once confident queen of the mansion was now glancing at the pieces with a tight jaw, her rhythm disrupted. Elijah moved swiftly, not with hesitation but with confidence, his mind 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. The guests no longer laughed. They whispered, they pointed, they shifted uneasily. The spectacle they had hoped for, a cruel humiliation, was unraveling before their eyes into something none of them could have predicted. And then it happened. Elijah's bishop slid across the board, cutting through Vivienne's last line of defense. His small voice rose again, firm this time, no longer a whisper. Check. Silence fell like a curtain. Vivienne's face froze. Her pride burned. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to laugh. "Clever," she said, though her tone cracked. "Very clever." But Elijah wasn't done. His eyes flickered to board, calculating, weaving invisible threads across the square. His next move was already set, his trap already sprung. For the first time in years, Vivienne Beaumont felt something she despised, fear of losing. And as the chandelier light bathed the hall in molten gold, the boy across from her, son of Maid, sat with the composure of a master. This was no longer a joke. This was a battle, and Elijah was winning. The room felt smaller now, as if the marble walls themselves leaned in to watch. The chandelier glared brighter, every crystal burning like an interrogation lamp above Vivienne Beaumont. Around the table, guests no longer murmured in amusement, but in nervous awe. The balance of power had shifted. Vivienne adjusted her diamond bracelet with deliberate calm, but her hand trembled ever so slightly as she moved her rook forward. She wanted control back, needed it, but across from her, Elijah sat with unshakable stillness, his brown eyes locked on the board, his young mind unraveling the patterns like threads in a tapestry. He saw more than move. He saw possibility, and he was 5 steps ahead. Vivienne leaned in, her voice smooth but tight. "You're a sharp boy," she said, "but chess is not only about skill. It's about endurance. Let's see if you can laugh." The crowd chuckled nervously, though their eyes betrayed doubt. Elijah said nothing. He reached out, small fingers brushing upon before sliding it forward with quiet certainty. His move looked modest, almost harmless, until the ripple of realization spread through the onlookers. "Wait, he's setting a trap," one man whispered. "Nonsense. He's bluffing." Another hissed back, though his forehead gleamed with sweat. Vivienne's eyes narrowed. She saw it too. The boy wasn't flailing. He was tightening a noose. She pressed her lips together and struck back, snapping her queen across the board with calculated aggression. The crowd gasped. Bold, dangerous, a move meant to intimidate. But Elijah only tilted his head. He shifted his bishop, steady and precise. The queen's path was blocked. A hush fell. The crowd leaned closer, eyes darting between the board and Vivienne's face. The once amused smirks of the elite had soured into wide-eyed disbelief. The maid's son, this boy with patched clothes and downered lashes, was dismantling their queen's empire one move at a time. Vivienne inhaled slowly, keeping her expression composed, but inside her pulse roared. She had never been embarrassed publicly, never cornered, and certainly never by a child. Her hand clenched against the polished wood table. She moved again, swift, slicing across the board with her rook. Elijah's response came without pause. Knight T5. The guests erupted in murmurs. Some gasping, some muttering. Impossible, someone whispered. Brilliant, another breathed. It wasn't just a move, it was the confidence. The boy wasn't surviving. He was dictating. He was pulling Vivienne along like a puppeteer tugging string. Vivienne's smile returned, but it was brittle now. You've studied, haven't you? She said, her voice sharp with forced levity. Surely your mother didn't teach you this. The words dripped with venom. Rosa stiffened at the back of the room, her heart pounding. Shame and pride warred inside her chest. She wanted to snatch Elijah away, to stop this game before it consumed him, but she couldn't tear her gaze from her son. He wasn't trembling. He wasn't afraid. He looked alive. Elijah finally spoke, his voice low but clear. I read books, he said simply. The guests stirred. Books? A maid's son? The image clashed too sharply with their polished world. Vivienne's lips pressed in. She made another move, fast, almost reckless. Elijah countered instantly. His knight snapped across the board, cutting her off once more. The crowd gasped again. Check. That single word echoed louder than the orchestra's silence. Vivienne's mask slipped. For just a second, her eyes flashed with something raw. Anger, humiliation, disbelief. Her queen was cornered again, and Elijah was relentless. The moves came faster now, the tension tightening with every piece that clicked against the board. Vivienne fought viciously, clawing for control, while Elijah dismantled her defenses with surgical precision. Each move was another thread cut, another wall collapsing. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their amusement curdling into awe. What had begun as a cruel joke was now an unthinkable reality. Vivienne Beaumont, the untouchable, the invincible, was being undone by a boy half her size, and he wasn't even sweating. Vivienne's hands trembled now, though she disguised it by lifting her wine glass between moves. She sipped, stalling, her eyes raking the board. But every time she thought she saw an opening, Elijah was already there, closing it off with terrifying ease. The boy leaned forward, his soft voice slicing through the heavy air. Check. The chandelier crystals rattled faintly, as if even the mansion itself bristled with attention. Vivienne froze, staring at the board. Her king was trapped, her every path cut off. The laughter, the superiority, the certainty, all of it drained from her face. And then Elijah's rook slid across the polished squares, sealing the fate that had been building since the first move. Checkmate. The word rang out like a gunshot. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Some guests clutched their pearls. Others exchanged stunned glances. One man actually laughed aloud in shock before quickly covering his mouth. Vivienne sat frozen, her face drained of color, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her queen lay fallen, toppled by the smallest hands in the room. For a moment, no one dared breathe. And then, slowly, Elijah pushed back his chair and stood. His small frame seemed taller now, his shoulders straighter, his eyes steady. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He simply looked across the board at Vivienne and said softly, "Thank you for the game." The words were polite, respectful, but they carried more weight than a shout ever could, because everyone in that room knew what had just happened. The queen of the Beaumont Empire had been dethroned by the son of her maid. Vivienne forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. Well, she said, her voice cracking ever so slightly, beginner's luck. But the excuse fell flat. No one believed it. The guests' eyes were no longer on her. They were on Elijah. Rosa's eyes brimmed with tears as she pressed her hands to her mouth. Her son, the boy she had raised in the shadows of wealth he could never touch, had just stood toe-to-toe with the powerful and proven himself greater. Vivienne rose to her feet, the silver fabric of her suit catching the light. She straightened her shoulders, forcing a smile, but her pride lay shattered at her feet like broken glass. She had meant to humiliate, to mock, to remind everyone of their place. Instead, she had exposed her own weakness. The crowd parted as Rosa hurried forward, pulling Elijah into her arms. She knelt, cupping his face, her tears spilling freely. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Elijah only hugged her tighter, his small arms wrapping around her shoulders. He didn't care about the whispers, the stares, the stunned silence. He cared only about the warmth of his mother's embrace. The guests continued to whisper, their voices buzzing like restless bees. Some were impressed, some were shaken, but none would forget what they had seen. A millionaire's pride had been toppled not by wealth, not by status, but by brilliance born in the unlikeliest of places. Vivienne turned sharply, her heels clicking against the marble as she swept toward the staircase. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break, but the echo of Elijah's victory followed her up each step, clinging like a shadow she could never shake. And in the glow of the chandelier, Rose and her son stood together, small but unbroken, the murmurs of the powerful no longer able to silence the truth. The boy was not just a maid's son, he was a genius, and tonight the whole world had seen it. Outside, the night stretched vast and endless, the stars glittering above the mansion like scattered pieces on a cosmic chessboard. Rosa held Elijah's hand as they walked away from the Golden Gate, her heart lighter than it had ever been. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she believed it could be brighter. Her son had proven something no one could take away, that brilliance needs no permission, no invitation, no pedigree. And somewhere in the silence of the night, Elijah whispered, almost to himself, "It's always just a game if you know how to play." Like, share, comment, and subscribe for awesome and more engaging videos.